So this is for EOL number 4. In this EOL, we talk about unwrapping learning standards. This is going to be helpful, obviously, when we actually have jobs, but specifically for this class for the assignment. So the last 15 years, there has been an increase in students with disabilities entering and being seen in the general education classroom. Each student with a disability comes to the classroom environment with a different set of skills and a different set of needs and a unique instructional plan that affects the educational benefit received from instruction. That being said, there hasn't really been an increase in students with disabilities and their academics and all that rising. So that is why we need to adapt accordingly so they can be in the general education setting while still thriving and reaching their highest potential. So when teaching and working with students who receive special education services, it is important for educators to understand that standards that are being targeted within the general education environment, because there's not a separate set of standards for students who have disabilities. So standards should be analyzed and dissected to identify the component and foundational skills needed to master the standard at that grade level. So we really have to dive in and try to understand the standard to our best of our ability. So students with disabilities may struggle with assessing the content standard at grade level because they lack the foundational skills. So we, in a way, I really think this is kind of doing some backward planning. So if they're lacking the foundational skills to interact with the material at a higher level of cognitive complexity through an analysis of academic standards, can help increase the vertical equity achieved by students with disabilities. So essentially what that means is if we really dive in and understand the standards and the foundational skills we need to teach our students, there's a higher chance of them reaching the content standard to the same as their peers. So a way we can do this is by targeting differentiated instruction that addresses students' individualized academic needs related to the standard, tracking student mastery of the components of the standard, which can lead to an overall increase of overall mastery. And there are 3 steps involved in analyzing grade level academic standards. First, we need to unwrap the standard at that specific grade level. Then we need to create a lattice task analysis of the unwrapped standard. And then finally, we're going to develop assessment of techniques to determine student standard. So I'm going to kind of dive into that process a little more. So by unwrapping standards, you're able to make broad statements more specific by pulling out general skills and concepts. You're doing this by highlighting the verbs and then circling the concepts, which are the nouns. So skills are verbs and concepts are nouns. That must be met to overall master the given academic content standards. By doing this, you are, as I've mentioned before, just giving a deeper look at the standard and what a student needs to have the foundational skills and what those foundational skills are. So once component skills are identified, teachers can then plan targeted, systematic instruction for students with disability based on the sequence of skills being taught in the general education curriculum. They're abstract and complex, making it difficult for students with disabilities to show progress and mastery of the skill because of the lack of foundational knowledge they might have. So to develop conceptual understanding, there are 4 main things that students must know about specific content. A, what the concept is. B, what the concept looks like. C, how to identify the concept through practical experience. And D, how the concept connects to other concepts the student already knows about. So I know on a lot of our lesson plans we have a section of what skills and knowledge the student needs to have to be successful in this lesson. So that's essentially what we're doing here. So now I'm going to go on to talk about the usage of the lattice task analysis. It is used to help slowly but surely assure a student has the foundational skills and understanding they need to meet a standard. So once completed, the lattice task analysis serves 2 main purposes. The first is a formative assessment tool. Each box of the lattice task analysis represents a component skill needed for overall mastery of the standard. And then the second is systematic lesson planning. Lattice task analysis provides a framework and sequence of instructional objectives that could be laid out in lesson plans to ensure student mastery of instructional objectives. So once educators have developed this lattice task analysis, the final stage of unwrapping the academic constant standards is develop a formative assessment technique. There are two main assessment techniques that can be implemented to monitor student mastery of the component skill with the academic standard. A, writing essential questions to determine student mastery of each doc level, and B, developing mastery assessments to track students' progress toward mastery throughout the lattice. So essential questions are simply worded yet powerful in the amount of information that they can collect about student mastery of the cognitive process at each doc level. The doc level is what we saw in the task, the lattice task analysis. And then the second assessment is a technique that should be developed as a part of the unwrapping process, focuses on component skills listed within the lattice task analysis. So yeah, it is a hefty topic and there's a lot to it, but I found this to be particularly helpful because it really broke down each step. And if you think about it, there's three main steps in forming and unwrapping a standard, but there's a lot to each step.